how do they do it? What happens in the human brain that allows musicians to improvise, creating brilliant new music on the fly? That's what a new breed of scientists are trying to discover.
Put this right on your lap here.
Where does creativity come from?
So remember that during this experiment, you're going to be using your right hand only.
You are witnessing the infancy of a new branch of science. The science of creativity.
I've always been interested in what happens in the brain, not only when we hear something beautiful, but also when we produce something that is remarkable.
Researchers like Dr. Charles Lim from the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine are trying to unlock the mysteries of one of mankind's last great frontiers.
The brain is the root of all human behavior and all cognition, and so it's always been a bit of a black box for us to really understand things that really relate to a higher order level of thinking. Okay.
Using functional MRI, Dr. Lim is searching for the answer to a question long thought the domain of artists and philosophers.
As I started learning about functional imaging, I realized that we could study some of these really complicated artistic questions and treat them like any other complex cognitive process.
A standard MRI reveals an image of the brain's anatomy, what it looks like. Functional MRI instead measures blood flow, revealing what the brain is actually doing in real time.
It measures what we call so-called hotspots of activity. So if an area of your brain is active or involved in a certain task, blood flow should go to that area, and we should be able to measure that increase in blood flow. So there's, for example, a temporal lobe of the brain which tends to process a lot of sound. There's an occipital lobe of the brain and back which tends to process a lot of visual information. The frontal lobe of the brain is the actual processor which takes all of this information and combines it into some sort of coherent whole. And so the prefrontal cortex of the brain is where we think the root of creativity really probably lies.
1, 2, 3, 4.
In looking for a vehicle to find his answers, Dr. Lim turned to one of his personal passions, jazz.
I've been a lifelong musician. In fact, I don't know that I remember a time ever in my life that I didn't play music.
The loose structure of jazz and the way it allows for personal expression and improvisation are some of the reasons why it is such a good match for this type of research.
In my first study of jazz, what I was looking at was how does the brain change when you're doing something memorized versus doing something improvised. When a jazz musician is improvising, there's a sense that they're going to do something that is kind of reflective of themselves.
Can I get my keyboard a little louder?
To conduct his research, a special keyboard was created that would allow a musician to play during an MRI session.
And what we found in that study that I think is most significant was that when a musician is improvising, their prefrontal cortex does two interesting things. One broad area shuts off. And that is an area of the brain that is responsible for self-monitoring, conscious self-censoring, self-inhibition. Meanwhile, another area of the brain, it lit up in activity, and it actually relates to self-expression. It's a kind of an autobiographical part of the brain. So we had these two things, self-expressive areas going up, self-monitoring areas going down, that were leading to the creative state.
These findings open the door to new questions and new experiments.
If that's what's happening when somebody is improvising on their own,
Trade force.
what's happening when two musicians are improvising together? The preliminary data are pretty compelling in that they suggest that when we go from a musical state where you are taking turns but not communicating, an area of the brain called Broca's area, which is an area known to be involved in language expression, is very active.
All right.
Such early results gives encouragement that a more meaningful clinical understanding of the nature of creativity will someday soon be within our grasp.
The advancement of our society, the way we problem solve, the way we innovate, it's all contingent upon us being creative. And I think that the more we understand the brain, the more we can figure out how to educate children, how to propagate creativity in society down the line. I mean, there's so many implications, I think, of understanding creativity.